Hello and welcome to the Evolutionary. My name is David Knox. I'm still your host. And today we have with us a very special guest, Sarah McLean. Sarah is dedicated to helping people wake up to the wonder and beauty of their lives with daily awareness practices and evolutionary meditation techniques. She's a best-selling Hay House author of a book entitled Soul Centered, Transform Your Life in 8 Weeks with Meditation, and another book entitled The Power of Attention, Awaken to Love and Its Unlimited Potential with Meditation. Sarah, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
I'm so excited to be here, David. Thank you for having me, and I'm glad you're still the host.
I'm still the host. Can you imagine? I've been able to retain this job for what it's gonna be 70 episodes this time, I think, somewhere
That's
around
great.
there. Yeah, whew, boy. I think we should establish how we know each other.
Okay.
You are the teacher and in some senses mentor to my partner, Katie. She has gone through multiple of your programs. She learned to be a meditation teacher through your school and also went through the mindfulness in the workplace program to be a teacher for that. And she has launched her business and it's going well. And we've met on one occasion in person and another time not in person. And you are, in my estimation, a person of deep wisdom and amazing experience that we're going to get into today. And I think you have a lot to offer to the audience. So I'm really glad that you're here today.
Well, thank you. I trust that you believe that, and hopefully that we can inspire and illuminate and give people some ways to address and how to navigate this current environment, political, environmental, personal, all the challenges that are rising right now that really call us forth to practice what we preach, including me and everyone else.
Yeah, it's definitely a very, very challenging time. And that doesn't mean that we abandon our practice. That means we lean into it more, right?
That's right.
To find that that support and that light there. So we might as well get this out of the way right now. And these episodes are timeless. They will be up for many years to come. And so, you know, the podcasting wisdom is don't be topical in the things that you discuss. However, let's be real. Yesterday, this is August, or I'm sorry, the beginning of September 2021, and we're in the midst of the second year of global pandemic. And in the United States, our president that I voted for, my president, got up and gave a speech yesterday that was terrifying.
It was so terrifying.
And so we'll go ahead and talk about that for a little bit, and then we'll bring it up out of the darkness into the light. But so, you know, what basically I saw was a tragically politically maneuver where he was doing a classic move of scapegoating all of the people who have decided not to get vaccinated at this point in their lives. And he lumped them all together and blamed basically everything on them and put into effect measures to single them out and make it difficult for them to be employed.
Yes, yes. And all while he was talking about, no, this is, I literally listened to this quote this morning. This is not about freedom and personal choice. He's saying, while the American flag's behind him, and I'm thinking, what country do we live in? I thought this was a country where we pledge allegiance to the flag for freedom, for liberty and justice for all. And I found that to be such a crazy moment in his talk. And, you know, the unvaccinated are like the great unwashed. But truly, I know I'm one of them. And, you know, I had COVID early on, and I trust my body and I trust the antibodies. I trust my T cells. And I think that's common science up until very recently when the CDC changed what vaccines were supposed to do. Originally, it was supposed to protect you from the disease. Then it was supposed to protect you from getting it severely. And now it's supposed to just protect you and not spreading it. And none of those were actually the way the vaccines were actually developed. They were developed to give you a particular virus to create the antibodies inside so you didn't contract it or spread it. And so they've changed over the past I'd say 10 years, what a vaccine's supposed to do conveniently. So
Is
I just feel like there's just a lack of personal choice in so many ways.
Yeah. Well, and a couple things. First of all, when you look at the trend of the pharmaceutical industry, it's very much in line. Is you remember the days when we used to get inoculated? You'd have a vaccine that actually you could take once and it was one and done. Then you're actually inoculated against that disease. And of course, that doesn't make a whole lot of money. It does up front, but it's much better if you can make people have boosters every 6 months or a year and just inoculate them against the symptoms, because if you inoculate them against severe symptoms, then you can let them get the disease and they probably will have less viral load because they don't have as much symptoms, I assume. And you can keep them out of the hospital, but they still can get it. And then they still need to go back and get the boosters. And that is really good for business. I'm slightly cynical about this, you can tell, but um, the whole issue, the second issue is one of just medical freedom. And it is terrifying to me that that is not written into the Constitution, that if you want to escape getting a shot that is required otherwise by law, that you have to establish that it's for religious reasons, and then you can fall
Well,
back on the freedom of religion. But
that doesn't work over here in California. I mean, I think it was probably a few years ago, and I wasn't living here then. I was living in a predominantly conservative state of Arizona, but there was, when no one was looking, a mandate that insisted that every student that went to school got approximately, if they followed the rules, about 73 shots by the time they finished their
wow,
school. And they did away with medical exemptions and religious exemptions. It became illegal to offer those. So a lot of people then went to private schools. And now even the clamp down is on that, because I have a lot of friends who are teachers. And, I wanted to share something that I found. I haven't 100% fact checked it, but I want to share it with you, because even if it's not true, I think it's important to say. So this is a quote from a man named Benjamin Rush. He was a surgeon, and he was also the signer of the Declaration of Independence. And this is what he said: unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize into an undercover dictatorship to restrict the art of healing to one class of men and deny equal privileges to others. The Constitution of this republic should make special privilege for medical freedom as well as religious freedom.
mm-hmm.
So this was, one of the founding authors and signers of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and it was ignored because I don't think anyone could fathom, even 10 years ago, as pharmaceutical companies were making their way into becoming one of the top exporters and industries in America. I mean, it used to be the automotive industry and the oil and gas industry, and now it's the semiconductor industry and the pharmaceutical industry. And, they have purchased and coerced almost every single person in office. It is unbelievable, from the president, and I don't even recognize who that person is anymore, to at least the Democratic Congress and Senate. And as we move into what's going on here in our governorship, where he's being threatened with recall, and really taking a look at the way in which they are drinking the Kool-Aid and completely ignoring the science, the medical science of immunization, of antibodies, of even looking at the vaccine injuries. And, they're not being reported. They're not being talked about. All we're seeing in the news, which has been somehow filtered, is something like breakthrough cases. The unvaccinated are filling the emergency rooms, and people are taking horse paste for worms, which is ivermectin, which has the fellow who found and invented ivermectin won the Nobel Prize. I mean, it's got over 500 peer-reviewed studies, but there's some sort of strange overtaking of the mental capabilities of what I would assume would be free thinkers. I don't know what's happened. I don't know how they got coerced. I think there are certainly people who want to fall in line and not make a mistake, but we are living in a very scary time. And I really try through my teaching to help people stay really strong and courageous. And that may just be 1 minute at a time. That may be the social pressure coming in, your friends that ignore you now, the people in your family that don't talk to you. And, even those people that have been vaccinated or after the first shot said, gosh, I don't think that was good for me, or now really considering that they don't want that booster shot. There are certainly people from all walks of life, from Christian and Jewish and atheists, from Republican and Green Party and Democrat, from independents to just about everyone, who are starting to say, gosh, wait just a second. What is going on here? They are trusting their body, and you absolutely should trust your body.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And the thing, I try not to watch the news. I am not of the warrior caste. It's important for me to try to keep my energy in line by not taking in all of that dark propagandist bullshit. But what does make it to me gives me a lot of concern. And the thing is that it's a blatant propaganda campaign. And all of the signs are there in terms of the style of communication, where we have scapegoats, we have name calling, we have propagandist terminology like "I believe in science," right? Which is absolutely insane, because all of the science that says what they don't want it to say is completely thrown in the trash, completely either ignored or trashed or panned, or has a misinformation campaign assigned to it. And all of that makes, if nothing else, if even if I wasn't listening to my body, I would really not want to get the vaccination, because, well, we're calling it a vaccination. It's not.
Let's
I
not.
would not want to get that shot because of that, because something smells fishy here and I don't like it.
Well, I think many of us have outsourced our sense of power, have outsourced our well-being. We've outsourced our entertainment. We've outsourced our sense of self. And this is a real call to wake up to the wonder and beauty of our lives, to tap back into the body's wisdom, to tap back into the inner GPS. And yes, I mean, I think we're in the midst of propaganda, and just, it's true. Science is never settled. Science is never settled. It is evolutionary. As we begin to have more refined instruments to look into the brain and into the body and into the more subtle realms, the science changes, and it has been like that forever. So when someone says, I believe in science, like it's a set thing and it has a set dogma, that's no longer science. That's, I believe in something I read. And science is not, well, I'm just going to say, unfortunately, many people have been threatened. And many people, I was reading a really interesting quote by the man in the New England Journal of Medicine, which used to be one of the most important medical journals. And I believe it was I think it was 2006. And I actually think it might have been before that. I don't want to say 1996, but it might have been. And he resigned. And he said, I hate to say this, but I am so disheartened by, and I'm paraphrasing, by the motivation of doctors who have been bought and paid for by the pharmaceutical industry, that I have to step down from being this editor of the New England Journal of Medicine that I've been working with for 30 years. And then somebody right after him, 10 years later, did the same thing. And this is what we're finding, is that all of these studies are bought and paid for, and oftentimes it's not revealed, even though that it says, what are your financial interests in this? Quite often it's not revealed. It's up to investigative journalism to find the relationships. But this is what's happening now with these studies, with VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Events Registry System. And if you've ever looked at VAERS, and I have people that have tried to post their adverse reaction to it, it is a daunting process. So as they said in Harvard, when they did a study, 1 to 10% of all adverse reactions are found there. And then, I don't know if this is true, But I'm seeing there's an overarching committee which decides which are worth having in there. And they started to remove a number of deaths and records of deaths and replacing them with heart palpitations or headaches and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Really interesting if you watch carefully. But, you know, like you want to curate, right, what you're being exposed to because your body is responding. You know, your brain, there's a part of the brain, all of you know, it's called the amygdala. You might not know the name, but you know what it does. It sets off that fight or flight response in the body. The thing about the amygdala is it's a one-trick pony. It only knows how to do it, whether the stressor is real, like, you know, someone about to crash into you in your car, or whether it's imagined, as we imagine a scary future, or we imagine, or we watch the news, or we imagine someone's coming to get us. Unfortunately, this really old part of our brain will trigger the fight or flight response. And this is what's starting to weaken our immune system, because that's what it does. It starts to weaken the immune system and cause inflammation in the body. So like you have to curate your consumption, right? You said that we've talked about this before, curating your consumption of the news, curating your consumption of podcasts, curating your consumption of food, starting to curate your consumption so that you can best take care of yourself and stop outsourcing your happiness and your health.
Yeah, I think this is super germane. We're going to start in future episodes talking about how to take back our worldview. And actually, I want to talk with you about that because when we spoke before, you had some really good ideas. But a couple of things that you touched upon there that we're seeing a lot of, and you hear this, it's all over the place, is the censorship. You were talking about it and what makes it in to the adverse effects database. That's now has got censorship. It's got that oversight, and they're tossing stuff out that they don't think should be in there. And you hear constantly about censorship on social media. I was on a call with, right, on social media. It's
I'm censored all the time. So yes, I know.
right, which is something that we should just say out loud right now, is that you are a warrior out there on social media, and you're saying it like it is, and you're carrying the banner of what you feel is right. And so you're facing this. I was on a call, a Resonance Science Foundation call the other day, and I got to ask a question of the brilliant physicists that they had on there, and got to chat with them for a while, and they're amazing. And William Brown was the gentleman who was posed the very next question after me, and the question was, you know, how do you feel about the vaccine? You know, give us some stuff. And he hemmed and hawed for a few minutes before not answering the question. And he said openly, well, I don't know what I can say without getting censored, because
Right.
he knows so many people around him that if they say if they just talk about what they have rationally observed as scientists and or medical professionals, they will get censored because it isn't in line with the agenda. And that alone is just so terrifying to me that I don't want to have anything to do with whatever that agenda is. They can fuck off.
They can fuck off, but they can control your life. And they are controlling so many other people's lives everywhere you turn. You know, that's why, you know, people are turning to alternative platforms, like, and they're not, listen, free speech is free speech, and you're going to get the unsavory right along with people who are very highly rated scientists. So there's BitChute. People are stopping Vimeo and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, and you can't even Google. So my advice to people is find an alternative search engine, you know, whether it's DuckDuckGo or there's a couple of others, Brave. Find an alternative search engine, find an alternative to your email address so you don't have to run everything through Google. Turn off all the allowances for people to track you and find out who you're talking to, and turn your privacy settings on. I mean, this sounds crazy, but I don't think it is crazy. I think at this point, you know, I have to go in for a medical surgery on Tuesday. And, you know, I have to have a swab up my nose. I have to show my proof of vaccination if I have it. It does call, some of us really don't need to have to face this. But you know what? Every time it's a real deliberate stance that I'm taking. Now, I don't want to fight those small battles. I don't want to fight the battles with the store clerk that's saying, wear your mask. I'll wear my mask. I don't want to fight the people that are just trying to save their jobs and pay their rent. Those are not the people we need to argue against. Or argue with. We need to, each one of us, sort of do what you're doing. Speak the truth. Don't be, I think we have to watch being alarmist, because that's not good for my nervous system, nor yours, nor any of your listeners.
Right.
And really stick to your integrity, whatever that happens to be. And I'm constantly praying for strength and courage, because like you said you're not a warrior class, but you're probably a different kind of class. And if you're looking at the caste system in India, now there's the intellectuals, there's the Brahmin, the priests, there's the warrior class. And, I feel like I am in that class. I feel like, I'm not Noah, but I do know that when everybody in the Bible was taking off, and Noah's like, well, I'm going to build this ark because I'm going to save these animals, and everybody thinks I'm crazy. And then he wasn't. And there's so many stories in mythology and Bible and the Talmud that show that sometimes, the persecuted are the ones that might have the keys. And so staying really strong is essential, and really tuning into your own spiritual practice is essential.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that it's important for people who have drank the Kool-Aid on this and are feeling like, well, if you're unvaccinated, you're an idiot and you're the problem, to maybe just take a breath and think about how you can be more accepting.
Yeah.
One of my favorite principles of Burning Man is the 10 principles there is radical acceptance. There's radical self-expression, and its sister is radical acceptance, because if you're going to express yourself radically, you need to be okay with allowing other people to do the same. But accepting people wherever they are is really important. And this whole movement of scapegoating is really reminiscent of what we all studied in Nazi Germany, what they were doing with the Jews and the gays and the blacks and all of that stuff. And it's so unreasonable. It's so motivated by something that I don't understand, other than political alignment with pharmaceutical companies. I don't know what it is.
Well,
but I don't like it. And it's important that if you're deciding not to get the vaccine, that it's important that you find a support group, because you're going to go through some stuff.
yeah.
Right? You're going to need the support of you have to know a couple of things. And I know this because I'm not actually actively looking for a support group. Katie is, and she's found some wonderful support groups. But a couple of things I think are important if you are in that camp. And one of them is that there are a lot of people who are making the decision that you have made, and you can find that support group of people who are in that camp. The second thing is that I would say the overwhelming majority of people who have been vaccinated are accepting. They are not out there, thinking that you should be put in a concentration camp or forced to get a needle or anything like that. I have a lot of friends who've been vaccinated, and we've discussed it, and they're very accepting. And so, the propaganda is not representative of the common view.
Right. Well, even the Associated Press broke with the sort of storyline that these are a pandemic of the unvaccinated. They finally said, hey, that is not what's really happening here. So we're no longer going to be saying that. But I think, it goes back to sort of the race to the bottom of the brainstem and the way people like to stay separate. It is the nature of the brain to create biases, to better understand behaviors of people that are different. I work with that all the time when I'm teaching mindfulness in the workplace. It's like, how can we create that diversity? And then how can we not just invite people to the dance, but dance with them, and that would be inclusivity. And so, I belong to a group like that. I am the mouthpiece in this group because I've been a lifelong Democrat. I've been the mouthpiece in this group to knock off calling people left or right or liberal or Republican or Democrat or Christian, or, I mean, it goes on. And every time I go, isn't this a commitment to medical freedom? Isn't this a commitment to personal freedom? If you start getting confused and think, well, Trump should be president again and there's election fraud, that is diluting the message. So I feel like sometimes when I go to these groups, I am like the one who goes, hey, let's stay on point here. Let's stay on point. But also what I find is that we are people that are excluded quite often. You're excluded from going into a concert. You're excluded from going into a store without a mask. You're excluded. And exclusion is really tough sociologically. I mean, it's what William James, the great psychologist, the brother of Henry James, said, there's this practice in tribalism that's called to cut someone dead. You exclude them from the tribe and they are cut dead, and they literally suffer and die when people don't interact with them. And I think that's what's trying to be employed here. And that's social pressure. I've lost a number of friends and some of them get so vehement and vengeful, and they start posting horrible things about me for my personal belief system. And aren't we supposed to be compassionate? Aren't we supposed to recognize the commonalities? Because the brain's implicit bias tends to focus on the negative and what's different, we do have to override that on purpose and hang out with people who are not just like us and normalize other people's opinions and religions. And I'm not talking about normalizing, hatred and Satanism. I'm talking about normalizing and seeing the way that people might view their lives and make the choices they make.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's so powerful. If you go back to the hunter-gatherer societies, if you were shunned, if you were cut off, you would die. You're not going to make it in the woods alone. Right. And so when you look back in history at some, being shunned by your village or being excommunicated by the church, this was a very serious sentence that could, that would impact the rest of your life, maybe even certainly shorten it just in terms of your emotional well-being. Right. Which then would translate to your physical well-being, which brings us all the way back around to fear. We're in the midst of a fear campaign, and it's been shown very clearly scientifically that fear has disastrous effects on the immune system. And one of the things that we've been looking at a lot is back to the whole propaganda campaign, is that they're painting this picture that there's only one solution here. Right?
Yeah, and
there's never only one solution, especially to a medical issue. And the thing, and at the very heart of this, the thing that I feel is counteracting it is there's this grassroots movement in the United States and around the world that is in direct response to the pharmaceutical industry and the treatment of symptoms. There's this grassroots movement to learn how to heal the body, not to treat symptoms, and to do so naturally, to learn how to allow the body to heal, right? What can we do to facilitate that, understanding that it's the body that's healing? It's got the innate genius and capability to do that. And how do we remove all of the modern lifestyle elements that are destroying our immune system? I mean, listen, I cannot believe that heart disease is no big deal, business as usual. Cancer is no big deal, business as usual. The American Medical Association admits that the third leading cause behind those two in the United States is improper medical treatment.
Yeah.
And there's studies that show that it's actually number one. The number one killer in the United States is improper medical treatment.
Yeah.
And so I cannot believe that we are not having a massive campaign, not to get vaccinated, but to get healthy.
Yeah.
What's
How about
happening
clean
there?
water, clean air, food without
chemicals
that aren't
pesticides.
GMO, or food without Roundup on it? I mean, I know so many people that have gotten cancer from Roundup. And you're right, it's heart disease, it's air pollution that kills so many. And I mean, obviously the profit motive is not there. It never has been. How about all the people experiencing homelessness? But there is an element of divide and conquer to make people suspicious of their fellow humans. And I want to share something with you that I recently read, which I find amazing. My mother lives in Salem, Massachusetts, where she's been locked up in a rest home for over a year and more than a year and a half, and not allowed to see me or not allowed to see anyone, and wearing masks everywhere she goes. And of course, fortunately, she has a few people in her community there because it's not a nursing home, but she really is isolated. And this does a huge number on people's sense of well-being and connection. And we are social animals for the most part. But there is a lesson that someone told me, and I think this is fascinating. There was a teacher who said, I'm going to come around in her classroom and whisper to each one of you whether you're a witch or a regular person. And my mother lives in Salem, and we all have heard about the witch trials. And whether you're a witch, and your goal is to build the largest group of people in your group that does not have a witch in it. And at the end, any group based that was found to include a witch would get a failing grade. So the teens walked around, they were trying to figure out who was really a witch and who was lying about being a witch. And they started getting very suspicious of one another. And they got into these exclusive groups. And then the teacher said, okay, now you've got your groups, time to find out who the witch is. And she said, everyone who's a witch, raise your hand. And no one raised their hands because there were no witches. She just told them there were witches. So that created this behavior of exclusivity and of suspicion and of not trusting their colleagues or their students or their friends. And so the kids were confused, and they said, did anyone miss up? And she said, there was no one there that had been told they were a witch. And that's how she taught about the Salem witch trials. So it's very similar, though. I mean, if someone throws a wrench into the works, whether it's Nazi Germany or whether it's the internment camps, for the Japanese Americans, or whatever it may be, people with AIDS have this sort of the same issue. And everybody starts to go, okay, that person's not like me. So we literally have to make a concerted effort to recognize similarities, to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, and to really work our compassion muscle, the empathy muscle, to understand that somebody else is not maybe choosing what you're choosing for a whole bunch of reasons that you can't possibly know unless you ask.
Yeah. Yeah. And that those people are not the problem. They're not the root problem that we're facing in our society.
Oh.
They're being painted that way. They're being made out to be, but that's not the way it is. Interesting stuff. Good. So I think the takeaway is that is for people to be accepting and curious. And I think one of the most important things that we could learn in our time is that the way our systems are set up, government, media, large corporations, is they profit by division.
Yes.
They are set up to create polarity. And that polarity we are watching rip our society from the inside out, and our cultures are being dismantled by that polarity. And
yes, and also our community-centric cultures are being dismantled. I mean, we are being taken over by, if you're locked in your house, you're ordering from Amazon. You go to the big chain stores, and soon, and this is true because I'm a small business owner myself, soon we're just kind of swept and we become irrelevant. And so I think that one thing we can do, to sort of create a community where you do have a farm stand, or you do have a local grocery store that's not a chain, or you do have somebody who's willing to share what they do. I think we should really think globally and shop locally and shop with cash. I know this sounds crazy, but it would be great if you weren't tracked and having to put your number in every time you go to Rite Aid, Walgreens, Vons, Ralph's, whatever it is. Is shop with cash. It still works.
Yeah,
it still works.
They do still take cash, and
so far.
you also allow the person that you're giving that money to keep it all versus giving 3% to Visa,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and if you think
And
that,
and the profit, yeah, the profit's better for that person there that's trying to
absolutely.
run a
And
business.
if you think that the large financial institutions are part of the problem, which they are, then you get to take that money back and give it to the small business owner, which is
Exactly.
a beautiful thing. But I think one thing the takeaway I'd like to leave people with is open your mind and find the commonality. We have got to find a way and make it something that we do in our culture to find that middle ground. That driving toward the polarity is what is killing us, and we can't rely on politics, government, media to suddenly stop doing that and suddenly start publishing stories that help people start to move closer together, move towards understanding the person that they've been polarized against, right? But that's where we need to go. And that's a grassroots movement that needs to find its way into our education system and into our day-by-day thinking. Is there's someone out there that is completely fucked up. Their thinking is so bizarre. I just don't understand it. Can I find a commonality with them? And the answer is, if you talk to them, the answer is always going to be yes.
Yes. It's always yes, if you can step beyond that unconscious bias, initial bias. And there are three components to compassion. There's being mindful so that you're situationally aware and aware of what other people are doing and if they're suffering or not. There is being kind, right? And being kind to that person. Compassion is really taking action to alleviate the suffering. And sometimes all it takes is just saying, hey, I understand. Tell me more about your position. And then the third element of compassion and self-compassion is recognizing the common humanity, is recognizing that you too, that person too, wants to be happy, wants to be healthy, wants to feel sovereign, wants to do the best they can for their family and for their friends. They want to have love and meaning in their life, and they want to feel like they're contributing in society and have meaningful work. And when we start to look at what it takes, we have to, this is a call to be compassionate. This is a call, this, whatever you want to call this, reaction to COVID. I don't actually believe it's a pandemic, but the reaction to COVID is really a call for each one of us to be compassionate, not only with others, but really to ourselves, because I know taking the road less traveled can be very, there can be a lot of self-doubt. There can feel, there's a lot of ostracization. There's a lot of loneliness. And so to really be kind to yourself and take really good care of yourself, because the truth is, this is such a stressful time. It is pushing so many people over the edge. Many people are having mental health issues. Many people are having addiction issues. And, there's got to be another way to say, okay, how can I best take care of myself? How can I best love myself?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for that. Nice way to wrap up that little introductory topic. Let's shift up and get down to Sarah McLean.
Okay.
Okay. So first, I want to talk about your business. You have, and I already alluded to them because Katie has been a patron of yours. My partner, Katie, has been a patron of yours in a couple of different ways. So can you tell us about the McLean Institute and associated businesses?
Sure. Well, basically, many, many years ago, I got really interested in mind body health, personally interested. It's sort of like something I read about. It was a book by Deepak Chopra. It was 1980, and I was lit up. I said, oh my God, there are these ways to take care of health that are based on aromatherapy and sound therapy and aligning your rhythms with the rhythms of nature and maximizing your digestion and staying really present and doing yoga and getting massages. And I was so excited at all these modalities. And one of the modalities was meditation. I went to work for Deepak Chopra in a transcendental meditation community. And that was, gosh, I want to say, got 1991, maybe. Yeah, it's 1990 or 1991. I went to work with him and immersed myself in it. I never planned to be a teacher. I only was a consumer. I was very interested in health and well-being and presence, and really moving beyond, like I say, outsourcing my happiness and really finding the wealth of peace and love inside. And so I got really immersed in it. And he eventually left the transcendental meditation movement, moved out to California, and I was invited to come. And we started a meditation, Ayurveda center, mind body center in La Jolla, California. And after many iterations, I had worked with him for about 8 years. I ended up going to India after I realized that I had set up all the programs. I was ready to go do something else. I went to India, to the land of Ayurveda and meditation. I lived in a traditional ashram, a la Eat, Pray, Love, only it was a different ashram. And I got really immersed in kind of that particular practice of devotional meditation and devotional practices, which I enjoyed, but it isn't necessarily my path. And I came home and I decided to move into a Zen Buddhist monastery. So it's vastly different from a Hindu ashram. A Zen Buddhist monastery is very austere. It's obviously based out of the Buddhism that is founded in Japan, the Zen practice, and it's very formalized, very austere. We lived in a monastic setting, sort of off the grid in outside in California by Idlewilds, for some of you who know where that is. And it's still there today. And I became a resident there for 2 years and became the cook there, and really got interested in the rhythms of mindfulness, although it wasn't necessarily called that. That's just become sort of the buzzword over the last 10 years. It was, 1997 when I was moving out of there. So I had gotten in there probably about 96 and moved out at the end of 97. And, for me, meditation was just, again, for my personal use, for my personal peace, because I had kind of grown up with a lot of trauma and I was just trying to feel okay in my skin. Fast forward, working for a few people. Some of you have heard of Gary Zukav, and then I went to work for Byron Katie. And there was a particular point in time I met my husband, who lived in Sedona, Arizona. And I moved there after we got engaged. And I thought, I'm going to open a meditation center. It was a few years went by, because at first I'm like, I don't want to be weird. I want to be normal. I want to just be like everybody else. And I don't want to sell crystals out of the trunk of my car. I just want to, just be normal. And I got really involved in environmentalism and tried to change people's minds about the way they interact with the natural world and its resources. And whether it has to do with the consumption stream or, what we do with our waste stream. And I couldn't change people's minds and hearts. So I went back to teaching meditation. I had learned to teach not only with the Chopra Center and Deepak Chopra as one of the very first meditation teachers there. I also taught at the Zen Center. So I ended up opening a meditation center, which I didn't expect to do. And I was teaching. It was called Sedona Meditation. I was living in Sedona. And somebody moved into Sedona and decided to, and they had very deep pockets, and they decided to create a giant meditation center. And they took the name of my company. They called it Sedona Meditation.
Wow.
Now, I had trademarked it and I had registered it, but they somehow had so much money, they were able to skirt around it. And then I had to change the name of my business to McLean Meditation. Now, McLean's my last name, and it was a very strange experience to move from sort of this anonymous behind the scenes person teaching meditation. You might never see me on you never would see me on my website or read anything about me. You just would come if you wanted to meditate, to now being the face of my practice, my meditation center. And eventually people started to say, well, you've had so many experiences relative to TM and to Vipassana and to mindfulness and to Zen and to the ashram setting. And I also had worked for Byron Katie as the director of the school for her work, so self-inquiry. And I had done so much work in the world, and I had created sort of a way of teaching. And people said, I want to learn to teach what you're doing. So I became the reluctant trainer for meditation teachers. And that was about 10 years ago. And I've taught over 350 people from around the world. We have 2 classes going right now. And I decided, and maybe it's in the light of what's going on in this world today, that there are enough meditation teachers that I'm going to teach, and I am going to, at the very end of our next meditation training, it ends on May 22nd, 2022. I'm going to see what's next. I'm going to clear my calendar for the rest of 2022 and see what wants to happen. I don't know. I feel like there's a revolution afoot. I don't know if it's a personal one or it's a collective, but I want to be available for that.
Excellent. I'm going to press you with some more questions about that at the very end.
Okay.
So you also, Katie also learned from you a course called Meditation or Mindfulness in the Workplace, which I think is obviously I guess a frontal assault to to the corporate realm, and trying to get mindfulness into that space, which I think is brilliant. And I worked in the corporate world for a couple of decades, and it really needs mindfulness. It really needs meditation. It's very much softening up to that, but it's a slow process.
Yeah, well, resilience is key. I mean, I don't know. You probably all heard that there is a huge supply of jobs, a huge demand for people to go back to work. And yet there are so many people, and I don't know if this is going to change over the next few months, who are just not ready. They don't want to comply. They don't want to go back to work. They got very comfortable living in their homes. I think it was a great musical chairs experience where the music stopped and everybody was like, okay, where am I now? And how can I make this really lovely? And so I know there are many people, not all, but there are many people who are not interested in going back to working the way it was. Now, there's a lot of studies on it in terms of efficiency, in terms of productivity, and they're finding that working at home can be just as efficient and productive. But then there are those people that work better as a teammate, work better with personal interaction, the more social aspect of it. And that is really what can make the difference between, according to the research I've been looking at, between a good company and an innovative company that is more successful, is by creating the diverse community and the inclusive community at work. But really, people's resilience is being tried. I know many, many people, I've been asked so many times to come in and work with people because, they're losing it, whether it's a mental health issue or whether it's a sick day or whether it's just lack of engagement. And so I put together an 8-module program to train in the workplace, whether it's an individual or a whole team. And I work with a number of teams of home builders and communications companies and things like that. But, I teach them the basics of mindfulness. I teach them how mindfulness can obviously help them with their well-being and their vitality and their resilience. And then we start to talk more about creativity and innovation and productivity and efficiency, really just sort of turning some of the traditional ways of working on their head. Like, multitasking is a good thing. Well, maybe it's not, working all day long and totally jam packing your schedule with tasks is not, doesn't lend itself to creative experiences and thoughts. And so really changing the way that people bring mindfulness into the workplace and practices that cultivate the very best of work and community and innovation and team building. And then we go on to emotional intelligence, then we move on to diversity, inclusivity, compassion and empathy. And we teach, 30 or 40 different practices that people can take into their workplace and changes their lives completely. I find that when they go through the program, then they bring their family. They all want to learn. So
that's awesome. This is very exciting to me. and I'm going to liken it to something that I've talked about on the show a lot of times on the microcosmic level, and I call it the bait and switch. And we've been watching this go on for probably 40 years, and the personal development used to be called self-help movement, where the authors and the speakers and the teachers, they cast out into society and they say, would you like a better life? Would you like more money? Would you like better relationships and more happiness? And then you get in there to get more money and to learn how to manifest things in your life. And in that process, you learn how to be a better person.
Yeah.
You learn that you need to be a better person. You need to get in touch with yourself. You need to become centered. You need to become aware of source. Let them, all of these things happen. It's a bait and switch, right? I would like more money. Okay, cool. Come on, I'll teach you how to be a better person, and more money will come. So there's something similar. What you're describing right now is what we're doing to corporate America and the corporate realm globally, is that we're going out and saying, hey, you can have better employee retention, better employee productivity, better creativity from your employees, and bolster the success and traction that your business is getting. You have better market share and blah, 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 all that stuff. And you get in there and you teach them how to be better individuals and better human beings. And that will bleed into eventually, hopefully sooner than later, because we're on a time schedule here, that will bleed into the actual leadership of the corporations starting to wake up, which we are seeing in a lot of cases. There's plenty of instances of people in leadership and corporations waking up, and they're starting to realize that there's more than just profits. And so it's a bit of a bait and switch, and it's really important that this happen at this time.
Absolutely. And with this, right now, there are 5 generations in the workplace, and, they all behave differently and they all want different things. But the latest Generation Z, really ages at this point, like 24 and younger, there are 8 million of them in the workforce right now. And they are very interested in social, I'm not going to use this word right, but wokeness, being awake to diversity, inclusivity, to equal opportunity. And if a company is not investing in that, they're going to lose the brightest and most, let's say, digital natives that are out there. And those are the ones they want to keep. So that these companies have to change. And it can't just be a whole bunch of white guys in the boardroom, which still is in many cases. Although some people are really making an effort. Some companies are really making an effort to diversify, to look at gender equality, to look at age equality, to look at racial equality. It's there in many levels of it. And so, but it does take the willingness to admit, yes, I have implicit bias. I was brought up in this kind of environment. I see people like this, just like me. And this is what I trust. And we have to challenge our own. It's literally the way the brain works. So we have to, on purpose, really make steps to take a look at, okay, we're in a meeting, who gets the floor time? We're in a meeting, does everybody get to be heard? We're in a meeting, is it okay if we share our feelings in this moment? So even though you don't want to pander necessarily to people who are drama queens and constantly have some tragedy going on, but we do want to know someone's first name and perhaps where they live and perhaps what their favorite thing to do on the weekend is, so that you can create these human relationships, because this is where we spend most of our time.
Yeah, and it's going to move all the way to the point to where we also want to know, what is your intuition on this, right? That when intuition then can be brought into the navigation of a corporation, which it already is, but it's at the very top, the intuition of that, eccentric CEO or whatever, is oftentimes what's good. But what if we cultivated that in the entire leadership team? What if we cultivated that in the entire organization, and empowering people at every level to do their job and let their intuition lead them into new, better ways of doing things?
Well, I would say you wouldn't use the word intuition when you're talking to a traditional corporate environment. You probably would use their inner wisdom.
Oh, sure.
Gut feelings, that kind of thing. Just because, I want this to work. I want to wake people up. Here's the downside of bringing mindfulness into a workplace. And, I don't advertise this, but people wake up to the fact they don't like their job. They don't really think this is the best way to spend their time. This is not what they were born to do. So, there is that downside, but the upside is people are healthier, they're more engaged. This new term presenteeism, I don't know if you know what that means, but it simply means your body is at work. You brought your whole body there, but your mind is doing something else, whether you're on social media or playing video games or concerned with what's going on with your kids who are, at a, babysitter's place. Or presenteeism is worse than absenteeism, because you show up, but you don't actually function. And so this is a big problem these days. People are just so overwhelmed, they can't even be present, because stress really inhibits our ability to be right here, right now, to be engaged in this moment, to be doing our very best, to be communicating with the person in front of us, to be focused, to be responsive rather than reactive. But it also can wake us up to the fact that, I don't really like my job, so that is the downside.
Well, it's a short-term downside for the business, right?
Right.
That if they teach all of their employees mindfulness, some of them are going to wake up to the fact that this is bullshit, I need to do something else.
Right.
But I mean, that also is going to allow them to get people into that position who feel better about it, about what they're doing. So in the long term, it isn't a downside at all. I mean,
Right.
I've been in jobs for years that I knew that I shouldn't have been there, and I should have left years ago, and that would have been better for them, would have been better for me. Right.
Right.
So it's actually just kind of a forcing function to get things straight on their team. I that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, well, that's a great way to look at it. I'm going to frame it that way from now on.
Yeah,
Not
right.
everybody's in the right place.
Yeah, get everyone in the right place, even if it's not within your organization. And and all the leadership training that I did in my corporate career, that was really important. If someone isn't in the right place, let's find the right place for them to
Right.
capitalize on. And maybe it's not outside of the organization, maybe it's just in a different place within the organization, performing a different role.
Right.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Okay, let's talk about your books.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, so you've got a couple of books. They've done well. And so I want to know about that journey.
Okay.
I'm using this podcast to get me to write a book, and it's going well. I'm writing chapter 9 as we speak, which is all about how to take back your worldview. So maybe I'll grab some thoughts from you on that as we go through this. But the process for me has been challenging and a little bit drawn out, but the podcast is the only thing that's ever actually got me to write anything. And if this is the first time you've tuned into the podcast, you can go back and listen to the solo casts 1 through 8, or basically my first pass at chapters 1 through 8. Let's say it's not quite like that, but roughly. What drove you to write a book? How did you do it? You've been successful. How'd you do that?
Well, I never planned on writing a book, just like anything else. Nothing has ever been planned, but I think what happened was I was writing a lot of blogs, and I was writing curriculum, and I was sometimes thinking about my own journey and how to share it with my students. And so eventually it sort of worked itself into an 8-week program. But the first book's called Soul Centered: How to Transform Your Life in 8 Weeks with Meditation. That was not the name of it. That was not the length of it. What ended up happening was, as I was writing this book, I would just write down my practices that I automatically already did. And I don't consider myself a great writer. So I think I'm much better now than I was when I wrote that book. But I came up with the term soul-centered to refer to a particular way of being. And I've talked about it a little bit on your podcast here. Soul-centered is when you resource your sense of peace, health, stability, strength, courage, sense of self from the inside. It's like following your inner GPS. And the reason it was so important for me to write it is because I had been outsourcing everything to others, whether it was my parents or my boyfriends or my job. And I constantly defined myself by what people thought of me, or what they said about me, or my numbers and my letters, where do you live, and how much money do you have, and what degrees do you have, and all of that stuff, which is ultimately changeable, all of it. But what wasn't changeable was this sanctuary inside that I found with meditation. I remember the very first time I meditated, I felt like I was coming home. And that's really what soul centered is to find the quiet power that's inside you, to, thank everybody else for sharing. And obviously we're living in the mirror of relationships, but to not outsource our happiness. And so that's really what that book came to. And then there was Sarah Lazar out of Harvard was doing a study on the brain with 8 weeks of meditation. And she found these various, what she would call neuroplasticity, the various ways the brain would change and the density and the structure of it based on the state of meditation. And she found, there was a density increase of the neocortex. There was a reduction in the density of the amygdala, the thing in charge of your fight or flight response. The neocortex, I like to think of as the CEO rational brain. And then amygdala is more like a reactivity center. They found those two changed significantly. They also found that the hippocampus, which is, we have two of everything, but the hippocampus is in charge of learning and memory. And that part of the brain, and you can see this a lot with COVID, with constant stress and cortisol, it starts to eat away at this part of the brain. So you can't even think clearly. You can't remember where you put your keys. You can't think about why you went into a room or what you're doing. That's the hippocampus. And the more you practice meditation, even in 8 weeks, that density increases. And then lastly, the center of the brain that's called the insula, way down, deep down, is really about emotional awareness, not only the emotional awareness of other people, but what's going on inside of you, and really tapping into what am I feeling and can I respond rather than react to it. And so I had written a 10-week book, but when that research came out, I'm like, that's it, it's 8 weeks. And so that's how it happened. And I just want to share for anyone who is trying to write, put plenty of me time in there. And, even Eckhart Tolle talks about putting writing time in the schedule. And if you're not writing, don't do anything else. Don't use that time to catch up on your work. Don't use that time to do anything other than sit there with your pen and your paper. Now, you can go for a mindless or wandering walk because you sometimes want to move from the left side of the brain, which is very convergent. It's always, where do I put the period and how about my punctuation? To the right side of the brain, which is divergent, which you want to take yourself offline a little bit. Go for a walk without a destination or sit and just watch the wind blow through the trees. So really and truly adding that into your schedule. And, some days you'll do anything but write. Like I said, I clean my closet, organize my drawers, anything but write sometimes, but you still have to set aside that time to do it. And it's not linear. You don't start with once upon a time and then end with happily ever after. You can move around the various pieces inside. So write what's turning you on in the moment. Write what's turning you on and forget about editing as you write. Do not edit while you write. Writing is coming from your right side of the brain. Editing is coming from the editing side of the brain, the left side, and it will stop the flow instantly. So really resist editing when you're writing.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That helps.
Yeah, that resonates with me for sure. And as I've, I guess, experimented with different ways, those things have come into play. When you're writing, you're not editing. The thing that I could do is schedule time every day where I just write or nothing. Sit and stare at a blank page. That's fine. When I do, I tend to go into project mode where I don't write for weeks on end. And then I finally go, okay, clear my schedule for the next week or two and just, hunker down and do it. I would like to make it more of a daily practice because I do find that the writing informs all of my conversations. It gives me mojo for all of the things that, on all of the platforms where I'm expressing or publishing. And without it, all of that just kind of trickles dry.
Well, it could be the other way around too, where you have a conversation, then you're like, okay, I have notes like that everywhere. I'll be talking and then I'm saying something, I have no idea where it's coming from, and then I write it down, and next thing you know, I'm writing about it. So it can be either way.
Yeah. Opening the tap.
Yeah.
Love it. Cool. Quick. Okay. So that was your first book. And then you decided
Oh,
to
yes. The
get
second book is called The Power of Attention. And let me tell you why that came about. Obviously, as a meditation teacher, I'm talking about attention, right? Bring your attention inward, or as a mindfulness teacher, be present with your attention on the external world, but the power of attention was really born out of my long-term practice. I've been meditating for 30 years, and I always say there are three ingredients to any meditation. There is your impetus for doing it, whatever that intention is, that resolve, that sankalpa, but there is that willingness to do it. The second ingredient is your gentle, non-judgmental attention, what some people would call your mindful attention. You don't have to have superhuman powers of concentration to practice meditation, but you do need to be able to pay attention. And I think we all have that ability, even if you don't think you do. And then the third ingredient for most meditations is an object to focus that attention on, whether it's your breath or body sensations or walking or mantras or loving kindness, all of that. So going back to the second part of the ingredients, what the attention, quite often, we don't value necessarily our attention. But I started to recognize when I looked closely at the power of your attention. Now, if you're in the spiritual world, quite often people would say, well, meditation is about getting in touch with, that self, that source, that spirit that's inside. Well, I would say that is the source of your attention. So if I asked you right now to tune in to from where your attention arises, it's challenging to find the source of your attention. It just is, and you were born with it, this consciousness, this awareness. But what is it that's looking through your eyes? What is it that's listening through your ears? What is it that is conscious of the thoughts that are racing through your mind? There's a presence there. And so quite often I would sit in meditation when these inquiries, like, where is my attention arising from? And is my attention the same thing as awareness? And what is it? And we talked about this earlier about the conscious consumption. What happens when I put my attention on, let's say, the mainstream media, or let's say I put my attention on trauma that happened to me years ago, or worrying about the future? And what happens to my body when I put my attention on certain things? And there's a direct effect, a direct correlation on my body and my mind when I am not in charge of my attention and it wanders into places that are not safe, let's say, or not savory. Then I started looking at the effect of attention on that which you're paying attention to, whether it's a project, a book, a relationship, a hobby, a garden, a profession. So there are a lot of studies that have to do with the power of prayer, that have to do with the power of attention. Just to name a few, Larry Dossey talks about it in his book, Healing Words. Dr. Emoto talks about the power of attention on bodies of water. And the quality of attention is what they're studying. If you're praying for a particular petri dish of yeast to grow, and it's going to grow more, even across the miles, than if you don't put your attention on that, or you put negative attention on that. Same is true for when Emoto studied bodies of water, and whether it was a bottle of water that everybody started to agree to call ugly or hated it, versus one that was sent the message of peace and love, and everybody focused on that. And then he'd take a droplet of that body of water, freeze it, and look at the coherence of the ice crystals under a microscope. And what he found was the more pleasant, coherent, loving attention that was offered had a direct effect on whatever was being offered, whether it was a yeast container or whether it was a body of water. Now, let's extrapolate that to things that you're aware of, your dog, your cat, your houseplants. the more you give attention to it, the more it tends to thrive. But that's the caveat here, is the attention needs to be gentle and kind. And there was another great book about it called The Secret Life of Plants, where someone would hook up these lie detector electrodes to plants and have different thoughts, and the plants would react to this thought, like, I'm going to burn you, I'm going to cut you up, I'm going to put you down like garbage disposal, or I love you. And the plants would respond in these ways. So it's very real. The thing about your attention is it's very subtle. It is extremely subtle. It can get hijacked by the race to the bottom of the brainstem that the news wants you to tune into, because they sell more advertising. It can be paid, your attention, you pay attention, you only have so much of it, and you allot it to things that you deem are important. But here's the thing, so many of us don't even understand the value of our attention, that it gets hijacked without our even knowing it. You know, for example, you might binge watch a show, or suddenly go down a rabbit hole on the internet, or start watching the news or listening to a conversation that is not nourishing for you. And so this is when you have to start taking charge of your attention. You reclaim it, you bring it back here, and you get to decide how you're going to pay it and be in charge of it. So you get to decide if you want to be distracted or if you want to binge watch, but it shouldn't happen without your permission.
Which begs the question.
That's the short version.
Yeah. And it obviously highlights the need to ask the question constantly, is this where I want to be putting my attention? What is this doing for me? And I like to use the term investing our intention, right? Instead of paying attention, because pay sounds like I only have, you know, it's a scarcity model, which if you look at our time-bound experience, then it is. You have 24 hours in a day where you're going to put your attention, but there are certain places that you can put your attention that you invested and you get returns. You get returns in joy, in increased immune response, in connection with other people, and you know, whatever that looks like. It can be very nourishing for you in your life, or you can just do what most people are doing today, but this is changing because of conversations like this. Most people are just allowing their attention to go toward whatever is loudest and ugliest in their environment, or they're choosing to give it to things that are blatantly unnourishing, like a first-person shooter video game for 12 hours on a Saturday, or binge watching Breaking Bad, or you know, or Game of Thrones, which are phenomenally well-made shows that are just atrocious in their nature and very dark in their energy. And so, yeah, asking the question all day, every day, I think is one of the most important things that you can do in curating your own consumption, is asking, where am I investing my attention? And is it going to give me the type of returns that I want?
It's a beautiful way to look at it. And, you know, I think of our attention as a pie. You only have so much of it, and you get to slice it up the way you want. And, you know, but I think it requires mindfulness. It requires recognizing the effect of what you pay attention to on you, and the effect of how people are paying attention to on you. And, you know, I do believe it is a limited currency because of our time-bound experience. Now, attention, I think of as a beam, you know, that's a flashlight beam that whatever you put your attention on is enlivened in your awareness. But the source of the attention, which I'll just call awareness itself, is unlimited. So, but I do like that you talk about investing it and getting a return on it. And I think the more we become aware of how and what we put our attention on, the more we can be ridiculously in charge of it. And I have a handout that I should put it on my website. That's just called the examination of attention. Just starting to spend a day noticing, what is it? What's your affinity? Do you tend to hang out in the future? Do you tend to hang out in other people's business? Do you tend to hang out in the past? Do you tend to hang out and dwell on your own self-image? Where and when is your attention focused? And this is really a key to living more of intentional life.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love that. I'd like to relate this back to something, a concept that I talk about on the show a lot, and that is creating social change. And I'm going to hack this quote right now. I just read it from on Instagram yesterday. It was a quote from Socrates about how to create change, and it's about, and the gist of it was, you put all of your attention on what you would like to create to replace the thing that you're not liking. And of course, I'm hacking this, I'm very much paraphrasing, but it was about not giving your attention to the things that you don't want. And one of the things that you mentioned was plant experiments. And I read a couple of experiments where there was three groups. There was the group that got the loving attention, there was the group that got the hateful attention, and then there
Yep.
was the group that got no attention. And the one that fared the worst was the one that got no attention. So
Exactly.
the one that got berated and told it was horrible did better than the one that got nothing. And so this is my contention in this whole social change thing, is that I'm not advocating someone to stick their head in the sand about what's going on. What I'm advocating is that if you give no energy to something, you're aware of it, you see that it's happening, if you give it no attention, it will die on the vine. It can't live without our attention. We give our
Right.
attention to the thing that we would like to grow in its place, and that is incredibly powerful. But to spew hatred at something is going to still give it life. I mean,
That's
we
a
saw this in the
great,
2016 election, didn't we?
yes, that's a great, great insight. And it's what we were talking about earlier, being cut dead, and that's when they wither and die, right? This is exactly the same. Yeah, this is exactly the same application. Oh, I'm so glad you talked about that.
Yeah.
I love that. I would love to see that meme if you have it. Forward it to me.
Yeah, I certainly will.
Yeah. Wow.
Cool. Uh,
Yeah.
so I want to back up a little bit and get a little bit more basic and talk about meditation, because
Yeah.
I like to sit around and think that everyone that listens to the show meditates, and that's just not the case. It's probably a high incidence of meditation in terms of people who are listening to this show, but I talk to people all the time that are trying to start a meditation practice and they're struggling, or oh, I just can't do it, or I go crazy in 5 minutes, or I can't stop my thoughts, all of the classic things.
Yeah.
And so I do want to go back and just talk about meditation in general for a minute. So uh, I guess let's start with, when you start a meditation practice, we're going to establish some motivation here.
Okay.
What are some of the effects that you see most commonly, most consistently in people when they start meditating in earnest?
Well, I think people start to find that they've come home. And that's such a great feeling of being at home in your body, that you're comfortable and you're clear. They think more clearly, they're more in touch with how they feel. Really and truly, I think that's what happens is people come home. And that's important. Excuse me.
Nice one.
I need to drink some water. Um, Hopefully you edit this. If you don't, it's fine. So,
Well, if I don't edit the video, what people are going to see is a masterful use of the mute button. So nice work on that.
okay. So here's what I find. People feel for the very first time, and I personally experienced this too, that there was such a contrast between how I normally felt and then how I felt after 10 minutes of meditation practice. And I was initially trained in the military. I was a medic who was a behavioral specialist who was being trained to work with soldiers with PTSD. And now we weren't teaching meditation, although I wish we were, but the person who was in charge of our platoon, who was a male nurse, he guided us into a body scan practice, which is one of the go-to meditations. And I was amazed at 10 minutes and how that contrast was so apparent. So what I can tell you about meditation is it's everybody's birthright. I haven't met anyone who can't do it. It requires those three ingredients: your willingness to do it, your gentle attention, and a focus for your attention. There are many misconceptions on meditation. And, like you said, my mind is too busy. I don't have enough time. I don't know what I'm doing. It's not working for me. I'm falling asleep. I don't want to change my religion. I don't want to be weird. I'm not able to levitate, whatever the story is. But here it is. It's natural. It's your birthright. Just like being able to sleep, meditation is something you can do and you have the capability to do. If you're listening to me right now, you can meditate. How do you start? Well, first off, you want a particular period of time that you can become quiet and undisturbed. So whether you're closing the door to your office or to your bedroom, you can even meditate anywhere. You can meditate in your car. And you can meditate on a bus. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to meditate on the top of a hill. You don't have to wear any special outfits. You basically set aside a particular period of time where you'll be relatively undisturbed. You can, and the way to set your timer, you can use your phone if you want to. And I like to use the Insight Timer bell because it's so pleasant.
Mhm.
I think it's a 99-cent app. I turn my phone off though. I put it on Do Not Disturb, and I make a commitment to stick with the entire period of time, whether I think meditation's working or not. Because what I do know is my subjective opinion has nothing to do with whether it's working or not. It's working. And the benefits of meditation show up when your eyes are open. But here's what you do. You decide how long you're meditating for. You decide what practice you're going to do. And I would say the simplest practice is probably, I like this one from Herbert Benson. He's a cardiologist at the Harvard Center for Mind Body Health. He wrote the book Relaxation Response. It is so not strange that I think anybody can do this. And you close your eyes if you want, or you can gaze softly toward the ground. Sit comfortably. You don't have to sit cross-legged. You can sit with your legs on the ground, or you can sit cross-legged, knee over knee, whatever feels good. And your hands can be just placed in your lap, clasped, or palms down over your knees or palms up. All of the special postures and accoutrements, you can decide on those later. The most important thing is to meet your own mind and to practice the practice. So you begin by, well, obviously you set your timer, you close your eyes or keep them downward to the floor. And you can begin with some deeper breaths, breathing in slowly and deeply through your nose, just to send a signal to the body that it's okay to relax. You begin to welcome all the sounds in the environment, whether it's someone in the other room or whether it's the planes going overhead or whether it's the dog barking. You just welcome everything and resist nothing. Then you let your breath return to its natural rhythm and depth and begin to notice the body and notice what's here, the bodyscape, the soundscape, the emotional landscape, and just become aware of it. You don't have to change a thing. You might just move to get a little more comfortable. And then you tune in to the breath. Ideally, if you can, breathing through your nose. You breathe in slowly and fully and exhale slowly and fully and start to become aware of the various nuances of breathing. Maybe the temperature change between the inhale and the exhale. Maybe the sensations that are moving, what the sensations of inhaling and exhaling, and noticing the pauses between each breath. And just let your breath charm your attention. And yes, you're going to have thoughts. You're going to think about later, earlier, tomorrow, yesterday, other people, all kinds of stuff. But your job is to keep coming back again and again and again and again to the focus of your practice. And you're also going to make a commitment to be kind to yourself. You're not going to spend any time berating yourself at all. Third, you're not going to try to have a certain experience other than the one you're having. Fourth, let go of expectations. Forget about all those images you see or all those articles you've read about meditation. And then you're going to stick with the entire 5, 10 minutes, whatever you've chosen. So back to the breath. You let the breath be natural. You let it charm your attention. You keep coming back when it drifts off. And you can start to use the relaxation response. They use the word one, or you could call it a mantra, where on every exhale, you silently say one to yourself. Just one. You don't move your tongue or your lips. Inhale, exhale, one. And you do this the entire time. When the mind drifts into another story, you bring it back. When you lose track of time, you can just open your eyes and easily look at your timer and then bring it back again and again and again. Now, however long you decide to meditate for, you can at the very end, hopefully you don't use anything that's going to alarm you, because you know how that feels when you're sleeping. And not that you're going to be asleep, but you're going to be in a very restful state of awareness. After the bell or the sound goes off and you're done with your time, I invite you to sit with a minute or two. Just notice how you feel. Notice the mind, notice the body. Invite those sounds again from the outside. You can even deepen your breath and stretch into the space around you. And honestly, it's that simple. Now, the body is trained to be really alert to the external world, smelling it, tasting it, feeling it, walking in it, eating it, seeing it. So what we're doing is we're turning everything inward and becoming aware of what's going on in the interior, not judging it, just simply going, okay, hello, tingling, hello, discomfort, hello, breath. You're just being very intimate with what's going on with your eyes closed. And it can be strange for some because most people don't sit around with their eyes closed. And that's why it's nice to meditate alone or with a group. You can go to meetup groups, and I lead a meditation online every Wednesday. You can join me there. We have a group of anywhere from 60 to 100 people that join us for free. And I'll be doing that till next May, every Wednesday. So I invite you to come, because the more you practice, the more you get to become more intimate with your internal world. And the whole point of practicing meditation is so you have a better life. Not so your meditations are supercalifragilistic, but that you have a better life as you're more attentive to your world, the person in front of you, how you're feeling, what lights you up, the impulses of creativity and aha moments. That's really it. Hopefully that helped.
That's beautiful and extremely helpful. And a couple of things. One is that at the end of the show, if you give me a link or some information where they can get in touch with that meditation, they can join that meditation. I'll put that in the show notes. And also, I think of the people that I talk to, I have conversations about meditation all the time with people, and most of them say, oh yeah, I really need to, either start my meditation practice or get back to it or improve it or whatever. The tenor of that conversation usually leads me to think that I think it was the second thing that you talked about is the gentle, the non-judgment during your meditation. You're having thoughts every 3 seconds.
Yeah.
It's okay. At that point, that's where people really trip up, is they sit down and they go, I suck at this. I can't do it. I can't shut down my thoughts. They're just going all over the place. My body hurts. Like I'm fidgeting the whole time. And they're absolutely harsh on themselves and judging themselves for it the whole time. And then they get up. And I did this for a decade easily, right? And so I've lived that. And the most important thing that finally got through to me, it's not that I hadn't heard it, was all of that is okay. Just sit with it, just observe it. And I was having this conversation with one of my neighbors as they were walking by the other day, and she was saying the exact same thing. Oh, I can't do it, whatever. What I reflected back to her was that if you sit and you just observe it and you just observe it and you just observe it over and over again and take the judgment out, at some point you actually start to back out of the situation into the third party observer. And now you're sitting over there having those thoughts, but you're back here going, oh, David's having those thoughts again.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And he's learning. Maybe he's having less than last time. Maybe he's having more. It doesn't matter. And you start to learn to remove yourself from that interaction and become the third party observer of your own meditation. And the thing that I've noticed in myself is that when I become the third party observer, my monkey mind that is constantly going, thinking it's not being observed, suddenly goes, oh, shit, someone's watching me. And at that point, it
Yeah.
becomes self-conscious and actually starts to quiet down.
Well, this experience, what you're talking about is a little bit of a different technique. And ultimately, all techniques lead to that road. But initially, that is so hard for people to fathom that they are watching their thoughts. And that's a Vipassana practice. Some people like to do the practice instead of paying attention to something like their breath or a mantra. They tend to go, okay, literally what you're saying, observe the thoughts, because they recognize they're not the thoughts themselves, they're the thinker of the thoughts. And this practice is called labeling, where you're like, okay, there's David's labeling, he's thinking about his book again. So, thinking, planning. And then you, like you said, as you do that, the thoughts become a little less charming and a little less, I don't know, sticky. And so you're able to sort of become less engaged in it. So both of these ways work. There's so many ways to meditate, whether you're labeling your thoughts and just imagining them as clouds passing over the sun, or whether you're focused on something and the thoughts are coming by, but you just keep staying focused on this again. So they're both really good ways to do it. And ultimately, like you say, you become less engaged in the drama of the thoughts, the storytelling, the interruptions, and you recognize that you are the sky. All the thoughts are just clouds that are coming and going, but you are the sky. And that is a beautiful realization. I think, there are a lot of people put the emphasis on these kind of more esoteric experiences and realizations, and that can be very confusing for a new meditator. For instance, I heard one meditation teacher, he said, all life is meditation, and that is not helpful for somebody who is having a life full of anxiety and stress and to-do lists. That's not how life is. But you've probably heard this, before meditation, it's chopping wood and doing dishes or doing the laundry. And after meditation, it's chopping wood and doing the laundry. And that the ways in which that we do it are the same, but the mindset has changed. So it is really a mind training, a mindset training. But really in the beginning, to be kind to yourself is essential, because like you, David, I was living in a monastic setting, 8 hours a day of practice. And I spent a good amount of that practice talking about how horrible I was. And what are we doing? We are training the brain when we're sitting there. We talked about that. So if I'm training the brain to say nasty things to myself, that is what I'm training the brain to do. So we want to knock that off. And we want to train the brain to be much more attentive and focused and clear, because the whole point of meditation is to have a better life out of the meditation.
Yeah,
That's the best thing.
I love that.
You know?
And I would say that for me, and maybe some people can relate to this, that whole party observer thing, being able to remove, that wasn't something that I mastered. That I caught glimpses of it. It was kind of a thing that improved over time. But the thing that actually got me to sit down at the mat every day was the third thing that you talked about. And that was giving the mind a focus. And this is what people think, that everything is TM and you can just sit down and you clear your mind and you're in some sort of, transcendental bliss. And that's when they beat themselves up, because it's impossible for an early meditator to do that unless they're especially gifted or some sort of starseed or something. But it wasn't until I went and found some meditations that were interesting to me, that engaged my mind instead of trying to clear it and allowing the monkey mind to bubble up, because that's what's going to happen, especially
Yes.
as an early meditator. When you sit down and try to quiet your mind, the stuff's going to bubble up. It's got to go somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Or you sit down and actually have a focus and you give your mind something to do. And that was what actually got me to sit down on the mat every day and make it a daily practice years ago.
Yeah, because we all have this default neural network, this ongoing monologue that when you close your eyes just gets louder. So it's not going to magically disappear. You can't stop thinking by thinking about not thinking. Instead, what's happening is you become more aware of the subtleties of the body sensations, the sounds around you, the thoughts, the breath. So the awareness starts to kick in, and awareness of that default network does happen. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong, and meditation is natural. It is everybody's birthright to do it. I've never met anyone who cannot do it. And so to continue to practice it and not give up, the benefits unfold differently for everybody. Whether the benefits are your telomeres get longer on the ends of your DNA, or whether, whether you notice that your cortisol levels are gone down, or your skin's clearer, or you don't have as much achiness in your body, or you feel closer to God. I mean, it's different for everybody. So I encourage everyone to give it a shot, even if, and let go of expectations. Forget about what everybody else is saying about it. Just do it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 8 minutes, whatever it is for you. And I like 20 minutes twice a day. I sometimes do longer because I've been at it for a while, but you can start with 10 minutes once a day and you'll still get some benefits. Think about it like brushing your teeth. It's a non-negotiable, hopefully. You do it every day. You're not looking for a fabulous experience, but you know it's good for you. You feel better afterwards. And that's how we have to look at meditation. Because if you're like, that didn't work. Well, yes, it did work. Objectively, if we measured your respiration rates, your brain waves, your blood pressure, your heart rate, we would find you're at a very deep state of rest, which is very nourishing to your body. And even if your mind was like, you seem like you were going all over the place, you're still getting the benefit.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So the next question is this, and this was first introduced to me, I think, by Carlos Castaneda in his books and his dealings with the shaman Don Juan, and then Deepak Chopra, who I've been a fan of for 30 years, and we'll talk about him later because I know you worked for him for I think 8 years. It's the idea that the effect of meditation is cumulative, meaning that it's not like, for instance, what we think of as working out or diet, where we do it for a while and then we fall off and all of our progress goes out the window and we have to start all over again because we didn't work out for 3 months. That there's actually a permanent, like, it's money in the bank. When you do a meditation, you can meditate and skip a year and come back and you're not back at square one. There's actually a cumulative effect to meditation. Is that your experience and your opinion?
Well, I've never missed it for a year. However, I do know that once you begin, it's like a karmic event. Not to sound too esoteric, but I think if you looked at your astrological chart, or someone, if you look back in your life, the day you learned to meditate or the day you committed to a daily practice is a karmic event. It's something you cannot go back and you can't go pretend that didn't happen. It will start to activate a whole level of evolutionary experience for you. And I often think of the meditation practice as a lover. It's a friend or a lover that, you walk away from and you left for a while and you come back and they're there with open arms. And that's meditation. And I do believe it has a cumulative effect. And I do believe that you can pick up if you left off, if you're a lapsed meditator or, any kind. It doesn't matter when you start. It doesn't matter if you're starting when you're 60 or you're starting when you're 16 or you're starting in your day before you die. It's really, really, I definitely would have to say it's a very spiritual moment, even though it may not feel spiritual in nature to you. It is a very, very important time in your life. In the Catholic tradition, they talk about sacraments, it's a sacred moment, much like baptism and marriage and confirmation. And it is a sacred moment, the day you learn to meditate and meet yourself.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I like to think of it as a truly something that can't be taken away, that every time you have a meditation, and then as you get deeper into it, if you have an experience during meditation, as you get into, some people do this right away, they jump in and boom, they have some amazing experience that feels like a very spiritual experience, and others of it, more mere mortals like myself, it takes a while, and I've had some experiences that I wouldn't trade anything for,
Right.
because they gave me a glimpse of something else, something beyond, something internal and external at the same time. And that experience, that one moment where I saw, I got that little peek beyond the veil, is it's one of the most important things that I have in my life, because it gives you, even if I can't articulate it, it gives me an understanding of the cosmos and of my nature here that is, I guess, helpful, peaceful, it reassuring that that this is just a sideshow, and that our real true infinite nature is
Yeah.
we're, you know, these infinite souls tucked in this little meat suit, and that this is an experience that we're having, and then we're going to go on for other experiences, whatever that looks like. And so it's been really helpful. And I think that the cumulative, when I say that, what I mean is that, or how I think of it is that during that moment, you know, to whatever degree we were able to achieve, we peeled away some layers and were able to strengthen that connection between our own awareness and our infinite selves.
Yes.
And when
Like,
that happens, go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was thinking about how they used to dye. I don't know if they still do it, but when I traveled through India and Pakistan, and they used to take these big vats of dye and stick cloth in the vats, and then they take the vats and or take the cloth out and lay it in the sun and the dirt, and they do it again, they do it again, they do it again, until eventually the dye just stops fading out of the fabric. And that's what I think in terms of cumulative is what we're doing every time we dive in, you know, whether you call it breath meditation or vipassana or whatever, every time you go into that state of meditation, because it literally is a state of consciousness, different from waking, dreaming, sleeping. Meditation is its own state. And every time you do that, you are immersing yourself in this vat, so to speak, of self-awareness, of recognizing your true nature, of understanding the nature of the relative versus the permanent, and diving into that world of peace and harmony, even though it may not feel that what you're doing is that. And then at wholeness, health, synchronicity, just really all of the good stuff you can even imagine. And then when you come out, and here comes the world, and it fades the qualities of the dye out right out of you, whether it's the news or somebody saying something horrible to you. And then you just go back in, and eventually that dye is indelible. So I think that's a good analogy for the evolution of it.
That is beautiful. And you touch on something that I want to talk about now, and that is synchronicity. So you hear all kinds of teachers from every tradition, including New Agey people, say that the time that you spend in meditation and making that contact with source, or with the universal mind, or with your, you know, cosmic nature or whatever, that it allows synchronicities to flow into your life much more easily. And that certainly has been my case as well. What is that your take on it? How do you think about that? And is that your experience?
Well, I believe there's a big conductor. I don't know if you call it God or universal source, intelligence. I don't care what you call it, but there is something that is orchestrating everything, some intelligence. And, you know, there's a saying in, I think it's the Upanishads that says, Aham Brahmasmi, I am the universe. Now that sounds really lofty, but you are the expression of the universe in motion, just like me, just like this podcast, just like you who are listening. Each one of us in this moment is the expression of the universe in motion. Now, I believe that when we get out of our own way, and meditation can do that, it can clear our vision, clear our awareness, help us be situationally aware, that we are more attuned to the signs and wonders. You know, whether it's like asking yourself, what am I supposed to do with the rest of my life? And all of a sudden a book falls off the shelf and you open it up and it's Perfect Health by Deepak Chopra, and you call the number in the back of the book and you start working for him. That was my experience. Or, and you know, you're walking along and you go, gosh, if I could just have a sign that I'm on the right track, and all of a sudden, you know, a hummingbird just comes and starts looking right at you in the face. I mean, I don't think these things are accidents. I think we can be distracted. And I don't think they're always happening all the time, but I certainly can tell you the incidences of synchronicities increase with meditation. And, you know, I often encourage people, and I probably should do the same thing, of writing a synchronicity journal. Like, tell me more about that. How did you meet that person? How did you step into that line of work? How did you know to do that when you were making that choice? And quite often you'll find there was some sort of tap on the shoulder that said, hey, that's probably the right idea. You had the idea first, but then the universe conspires to point you in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I do believe it's happening. Synchronicities are just happening all the time. That's what synchronicity means.
So you just alluded to one or two of them. Do you have another one or two big ones that you'd like to share? I don't mind chipping in too.
Well,
This is the fun
I
part.
don't
There's a lot
know.
of story.
Let's see. Well, I can tell you one that's more recent. Well, not that recent, but somewhat recent. I decided to go to watch a woman that her name was Byron Katie. I didn't know really anything about her. I was living at the Zen Center, and then I went back every time I was on vacation. I would go to their sessions, which are these 8-day or 10-day programs. And I went with a boyfriend. And at that time, in Zen, you can actually meditate with your eyes gazing downward to the floor. And of course, if you're into it for about 4 or 5 hours, I'm human. I'm looking around going, okay, what's going on? And I could see my boyfriend sitting at the other side of the room, gazing at this woman who's over there. And I go, I'm not going to spend the next 8 days doing this, watching him watch her, or even being in that environment, because it was just unpleasant for me. So I called my friend and I said, what do you want to do? And she goes, let's go to a juice fast. And so I said, okay, I got the car, went and picked her up, and we went to a juice fast in Malibu. And when I got there, the woman who was running it, her name was Byron Katie. I hadn't heard of her before. I didn't know much about her. But when I saw what she did, the self-inquiry program, and I recommend, I'm not going to go into it now, but if for the listeners here, you can go to thework.org and you'll see what I'm talking about. Anyway, she's standing there and her presence was so clear and so awake. I'm like, there I was meditating in a Zen center, and this person is the Buddha. Not that I say everybody's the Buddha, but we all have Buddha nature. And so I sat with her and got the experience of, I actually decided to ask her if I could work for her. And I got a yes, but I had to move from Mount Shasta, where I was living, down to LA. So I got in my car with my studded snow tires to get over the mountain passes, and I'm driving around in Manhattan Beach with my studded snow tires. And I found a house next to a friend of mine that needed to be, somebody was going on vacation. I asked, could I be your house sitter? And they said yes. So there I was sitting in this house, and I'd walk myself back and forth to the beach, because at this point I decided this man that I was sitting there meditating with initially was not going to be my boyfriend. And I decided to marry myself. I'm giving you the cliff notes. So I went and bought myself a ring. I told myself I'd never leave myself. I wasn't going to outsource my happiness anymore. And this is really where I began to say, I am committed to myself. It was a really long journey, but so months passed and I'm living in this house, taking myself out on dates, marrying myself, not worrying about if I'm 100%, not worrying about if I can ever find somebody to be with. And the next thing you know, I realize that I am walking every day past this woman's house, Byron Katie. I had no idea where she lived, and we were working in a completely different state, but I'm on her same street. And so the reason I got a job with her is because one of her assistants or her consultants fired everybody except for 2 people who were working with her. And so she really needed some help, even though it went against that consultant's idea. So I'm walking past her house every day on my day, in my mornings, take myself out on a date, walking to the beach. And one day I found out where she lived. I had to deliver some papers to her, and I couldn't believe she was a few houses away from where I was house sitting. And I walked in and I gave her the papers, and there was a man there. And this man, I looked at him, I go, I am married to myself. That's it. But I did talk to him, and turned out we both spent many years in ashrams and monasteries. I was born in New York. He was born in New York. I lived in Boston. He lived in Boston. He was sitting right there at Katie's house, and he had been, without me knowing it, he was visiting from Arizona. He had been watching me walk on to and from the house to the beach on my dates, and he kept commenting to himself, gosh, who is that woman? It's like I was the quintessential California girl, which I'm not. I'm a Bostonian. And turns out he's now my husband. But it was just very coincidental. He was the one who had fired everybody because he was he was the business consultant. He had fired everybody, and he was furious that she hired somebody else, and it turned out to be me. And so it was just a funny thing because, I followed my intuition to ask for the job, and followed my intuition to get to house it in this house. And, I was doing everything that I would do, but the whole universe conspired to bring me to meet this man who we lived 5 miles apart from each other for 30 to 40 years before
Awesome.
we met.
Wow.
Then we met in LA because he was there bringing his daughter to check out different schools for her opera singing. But that's just one. I mean, there are many, many, many ones, but they're often, if you're doing you and you're following your inner GPS, you're going to find that the whole universe is really conspiring you to wake up. It has no choice.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I love the idea of a meditation or a synchronicity journal. And I've been telling myself to do that for 20 years because I can't remember. They happen so often. And a lot of
Yeah.
those little fun, quirky ones, right? And those ones just slip in. And the other thing that we do is, I always admonish people not to miss the miracle because we ask for something and then circumstances magically arrange. But because it happened over time and we watched the circumstances arrange, then we chalk it all up to, oh, look, all these coincidences. And maybe I worked a little hard, or so maybe I answered a call or whatever. And
Yeah.
so we miss the miracle. We just chalk it up to, oh, isn't that fortunate? And yeah, it's fortunate because it was a flat out miracle. You asked for the thing, the arrangements were made, there you are. And
Yeah.
oftentimes the arrangements are made in a way that is very, very seldom, I find, are those arrangements orchestrated in a way that violates our worldview.
Oh, right. It's
Right.
and it's nonlinear.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about, as now that you're asking me, I mean, the list goes on and on and on about even how I ended up in Santa Barbara. And it's really, God is good. That's all I have to say. I mean,
Yeah.
I just really caution people when they have a particular desire, whatever that may be, whether it's for a job that you love or a partner that you communicate with or a place you want to live, is to be okay wanting what you want. I mean, it's not an accident to have the desire for what you want. It may seem selfish initially, but forget about it. Want what you want. Then you have to stay out of how it's going to happen and when. And
Mhm.
like you say, you have to be able to receive. And that requires being situationally aware, like, oh, okay, I was supposed to take a left, but now I took a right, and look where I'm sitting now. And who is that person I'm meeting? Oh my gosh, I've never met this person, but they've got the book I want to read. And I'm talking about something that happened to me recently. And then I wanted to meet the author, so she introduced me to him. And there are things like that. And only because I had the desire to meet this author did that whole thing get organized for me. But I could never, and you never, can plan how it's going to happen. So we have to stay out of the how and the when, and we have to be okay with wanting what we want and just letting go of the details.
Yeah. One of the things that I think people run into, and I certainly did for many years, is the idea of the renunciant in the center, and that if you have desires, those are evil and you need to stuff those down. And the fact is that's not our path. Our path is actually through our desires. We have to meet them. We have to get in there and sort out that karma. We have to move through it and work it off. And sometimes that's going and having your desires fulfilled and experiencing them and moving through them to realize that that's wonderful. I'm grateful for those experiences. It's still not the nectar, right? That earthly desire that I'm so grateful that it was fulfilled for me. Thank you so much. But it still isn't the actual nectar. It's not the spiritual unity. And and so moving through it is really important, because if we don't, we stuff it down, Catholic priests and altar boys, you know what I'm saying. So it's
I
important.
do. Repressed desires are not ever healthy. I mean, I'm not talking about desires for self-image or desires that are distasteful, but I don't think there's anything wrong with any desire that you have. And if you happen to be the person that has a desire for money, and this is important, I always ask this from people, figure out what you want that money for. Is it freedom? Is it to pay your bills? Is it for a new house? What is it for? Is to give away, so that you desire that, because money is simply a currency, a way, a means.
Mm-hmm.
And so really get a little clear about why you want it. Maybe you want a new pair of shoes, who knows what it is, but whatever it may be, skip the how, because the money is the how,
Right.
and go to the what.
Dig deeper into the primary, the foundational desire, right? Because desires come in layers. I actually want a lot of money because it's a tool and a toy. It does stuff for me, or it gives me security, or whatever that is. So ask for the security and
Right.
to have the resources and the experiences that you want from those toys, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to own the boat to go for a ride on a boat, right? There's all kinds of ways to do these things. So,
Exactly.
yeah, thank you for that. That's beautiful. Okay, so let's talk about a couple more things here. You spent time in, there's so many layers. You're a very interesting person, Sarah.
Yeah.
You've got a lot going on in your history. I want to talk about your time in India, and I know that you, would it be appropriate to call you a disciple of Mother Amma?
I probably wouldn't use those terms. I think she's one of my teachers. I have so many.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I don't think I'm a disciple. I've never actually used that term for myself, but maybe I'll check into it.
But you spent time in her ashram, yes?
I did. That was another synchronicity. I was, when I lived in the transcendental meditation community, we weren't allowed to see other teachers. We weren't allowed to follow other gurus other than Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. It was very, very limited, very interesting community. I love the technique, but the community is out there. Anyway, so I finally moved, as I said, to Southern California to help Deepak open his centers. And then after I sort of helped him, I love to start things. I love to build things. I love whether it's a house or whether it's a business or whether it's a program. And after about 8 years of working with him, I was sitting in the center in La Jolla, and I thought, I think I'm done. I think I'm done here. And it was just in a staff meeting. And obviously a couple of days went by, and I thought, well, I'm going to give my notice. And they were restructuring, and I didn't have to do it. They had actually given me a whole bunch of money and said, look, we're going to be restructuring this part of the program. And at first, my ego was bruised, but the money was great. So I took that money, I went to India, and I didn't know what I was going to do. But I was heading to this one ashram, and I get off the plane. I made no arrangements. I just had some stuff in a bag and didn't know what I was doing. And I got off the train, and there was a picture this man was holding right up in my face of this guru, Amma, who I had met prior to coming over to India. And I'm like, well, that must be for me. I mean, her ashram was 2 or 3 miles away. 2 or 3 hours away. And so I got into the car with him, and he took me to the ashram. And I walked up, and we get to stay in these dorms.
So can I just ask you a question? Do you think you stole someone's ride?
No, I didn't. I know I didn't. Because I was looking around for other people. There was one other woman that was going to go. And so we rode together, but I didn't steal anybody's ride. That's a good question. So I get
like the Bud Light
there.
commercial, 15 years ago.
Yeah. You never know. But so I get in the car, and it was so hot. It was September, and it was so hot there. And no matter how light your clothes are, it's just not light enough. So halfway to her ashram, the car breaks down. We have to spend the night somewhere while the car is getting fixed by some random person. And then we get to her ashram finally, and I was put up in the Krishna dorm, which it's just, you basically get a bunk bed and there's no mattress. It's just wood. And so you have to figure out what you're going to sleep on. It's usually a blanket, and that you fold it and that's it. It's a little hot and I was a little uncomfortable. And so I get there and I'm standing there. Now, for those of you who know Amma, she is very popular. She's probably hugged multi-millions of people, right? At least. And there are hundreds of people staying there. She walked right up into the room where I was staying. And I was so flustered because I don't know her. And I said, "Oh, thank you for coming." And she looked right at me and she put her hand right here. And now she didn't know this. I never talked to her about it, but I had had cancer right here in my thyroid. And she just kept putting her hand right here on my throat and then went off to do her thing. So I lived there for 6 months. I was in a couple other places in India, but I was basically, that was my home base, and really was immersed in the life of an ashram, which consisted of getting up very early. My seva was to chop the vegetables while everybody was chanting the 1,000 names of Mother Divine, chopping actually the breakfast. So I was chopping vegetables for lunch, but I was also chopping the fruit for breakfast and chanting. I would do yoga every day. I would sit with her and listen to the music and meditate and go see her and get hugs from her. And it was a beautiful experience of a completely different way of living than, let's just say, living in a transcendental meditation community, or living in a barracks of the US Army, or living in my dorm at the college. But it was really similar. I mean, we all have to have the same daily routine, just maybe a different rhythm, and we all have a mission. And so I just love community life. I love working together. And for me, I just wanted, basically my desire is to be enlightened. So I get to sit with her and get to know her. I felt like karmically it was really, really important for me to be there, and not wish that I had been there, but actually be there. And I found a lot of magical moments there where I could understand languages that I never studied, or I could know what was going to happen next. I just felt like there was the veil was thin there. But I got back from there after 6 months, and I moved into the Zen Center in California. And then the Chopra Center hired me back. So it was like a big gift of tens of thousands of dollars that I funded my trip. And then I could come back, and I continued to work for them and help them do their programs while I was living at the monastery. And eventually I helped them with a few projects, and eventually just moved into the monastery, which was very austere. And there were no gurus, there's no devotion. It is very based on sitting in silence and not moving and not having desires and not having God or it's just completely the opposite of this whole sort of pomp and circumstance that happens around a guru. So it was really cool because I got a chance to look at the way my mind worked. And so anyway, I just want to fast forward to maybe a few years later. I ended up running some of the programs, or being a speaker for the programs for the Chopra Center, and became a public speaker, which was the last thing I'd ever thought I'd do. I was always the person in the back of the room running the programs. I was the person that never wanted to be on the stage. I never wanted to be known for anything. And so my evolution was to get my voice, and you obviously can't stop me from talking now, but to teach and get my voice. And it was just a long journey. And I felt like, some people, I'm not going to say it's based on gender, but there's some people that say, how hard could this be? I think I'll run for president. How hard could this be? I think I'll be the CEO of this company. And then there's some people that say, oh, I still need a little bit more education. I'm not quite ready to do that. And I will happen to be in that camp where, maybe I don't know everything, and maybe I still need to learn more. And I still feel that way. As a matter of fact, I told you I'm going to retire from the teacher training program. I'll probably start it again maybe in 2023, but I cannot wait to see what happens. My big plan is to read mystic poetry and read about the lives of saints. And I mean, that's really what lights me up. Teaching is great too. but I want to do more immersion into the spiritual path.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, that actually is one of my last questions, is what you're going to work on, which is fun. But I do want to talk about Deepak and Byron Katie, because I think that, you know, you have direct experience with them, working with them directly and for
Yeah.
them. And so I want you to talk a little bit about each of those. You can start with whichever one you want. And I want to know what it was like, and what did you take from them?
Well, so I love Deepak Chopra. He really gave voice to the complementary way that we could take care of the body through the ancient art of Ayurveda. I was really lucky because I really got an opportunity to watch him go from, an East Indian doctor who had a private practice as an endocrinologist in the town near where I lived
In
to
Boston?
becoming this superstar. And I mean, there are many things I learned from him, but he's very in this world and not of it, for sure. So we're not hanging out and calling each other, and out there we do have meaningful conversations. But one thing I learned from him is his generosity. Whether you went to a book signing that was free at the local Barnes and Noble, or whether you signed up for a massively expensive program with him, he's going to give you the same thing. He's going to not withhold anything. He wants you to have it all. Now, obviously, time constraints and location constraints and venue constraints, whatever, but he never withheld anything. And I really appreciated that. I really appreciated him. I still do for that. He taught me not to withhold anything. So I always found him to be a man of integrity. I know people have other opinions about it, but I've always found him to be kind and gentle and generous. I love his family. I love his mother, his wife, and his kids. I find them to be a lovely group of people. Maybe they're not from the Brahmin class in India, but they are the warrior class. And I feel like he's a warrior for awakening people to the way the brain works, the way consciousness works, the way health works, to really take that spiritual path. So I definitely have utmost respect for him, and appreciate what he has done for those of us who care about Ayurveda and the Vedas itself, Vedanta, which I do. And in terms of Byron Katie, so there I was working for her because I really loved what her inquiry did. As much as I had been meditating and years had gone by,
Can
I
you give
still
us
had,
just a very quick overview of the work?
yeah, so I will, because so I came back from India, went to the Zen Center, started work for a man named Gary Zukav, worked with him for a year and a half. I was living at Mount Shasta, decided to come down to work for Katie. And when I told you, I walked into the room and I said, there's the Buddha. What she did was so essential. And it is it is a kind of a koan practice, a practice where you wake up to your true nature. But what she does is called the work, and it's a self-inquiry practice. And so let me give you an example. I had the belief, even after all those years of meditating and it didn't go away, that I was unlovable. There was a belief system, and I could give you all the proof in the world why I was not worthy of love and I was unlovable. So when I sat with her, and it doesn't matter what your belief system is, whether it's about yourself or your neighbors should take care of all the chickens or whatever it may be, because I'm dealing with that here. Whatever it may be, you can take a thought that causes suffering, and then you ask 4 questions. So you could do this now. You could think of something. You don't have to tell me what it is. And the first question you ask yourself is it true that I'm unlovable, or my neighbor should take care of the chickens, or whatever your story is? Now, the answer could be yes or no. If you believe it, it's probably true, at least in your mind. And the second question is, can you absolutely know it's true? Well, absolutely, probably not. So is it true? Can you absolutely know it's true? The sub question to that is, what's the reality of it? Are you lovable? Are the chickens being taken care of? The third question is, how do I react when I believe the thought? How do I react when I believe the thought that I'm not lovable or my neighbor should take care of his chickens? How do I react? How do I feel? Where in my body do I feel it? How do I treat people when I believe this thought? What do I say or do when I believe this thought? How do I treat myself when I believe this thought? And does it bring peace or does it bring suffering? I also like to ask the question, what are my payoffs for believing this? Do I get to be right? Do I get to be separate? Do I get to be angry? Do I get to be sad? Do I get to be in some sort of drama? So the fourth question is, who would I be if I were unable to think this thought? Who would I be if I were unable to think this thought? That goes for any thought you're thinking. That question is a difficult one because quite often you're left with kind of a blank mind or dial tone. Who would I be if I were unable to think this thought? And I like to spend a little time there. Maybe I'd be lovable. Maybe my neighbor's chickens are fine. Who would I be if I were unable to have that judgment or that thought? And then the last bit that she does, it's optional, is what's the opposite? What's the turnaround here? I am lovable, right? Maybe, sometimes. Those chickens are being taken care of. Maybe, sometimes. You can also change it to, my thoughts are lovable, or I love my neighbor, or whatever it may be, but you take a look at the opposite. You make it turn around to the opposite. So my mind is unlovable when I think I'm unlovable, right? So you can always put my thinking in there. My thinking is unlovable. But this practice, what it does, it doesn't solve anything necessarily right off the bat, but what it does, it gives that brain, and we talk about neuroplasticity, the ability for the brain to create new neural pathways so that you start to get out of the rut of beating yourself up or hating the world or not questioning anything. You get a chance to go, wait a minute, is it even true? Can I actually even know that that's true? I know I've been believing it for 40 years, but is it really true? So this just gives you a little more freedom. So I went to work for her, and she ended up moving. I ended up moving to Sedona, engaged to my husband. She moved to the house next door, from that house in Manhattan Beach, right next door. So I traveled with her through Europe and became the director of her schools and wrote the curriculum, which I love curriculum. I'm still in the middle of writing curriculum. I could write curriculum all day because I like to write, tell people what to do. So that's what I worked with her for a couple of years. And then she ended up moving to Ojai. I ended up moving to Santa Barbara, next town over. And I haven't seen her because it's a pandemic mostly. I haven't been over there yet. I've seen her on her show. She has a lot of free programs. Yeah.
Beautiful.
It was really good, really fun.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So, okay. So what you're gonna retire from the mindfulness teaching, the teachers, which you've been doing for a long time. And
I'm going to retire from the Meditation Teacher Academy. I'll still, if someone, I might sell it. If someone does buy it and they want me to continue to be the teacher, I will. It's an amazing program. Ask Katie, it transforms lives. And I feel like the teachers that have all been sort of trained now, I have grandchildren meditators, they've all taught meditation to all these people and changed their lives. And it's such a beautiful karmic event, to help people wake up to the fact that they have everything they need. It's a beautiful gift that I really feel it's sacred. And I also believe that you've got to do it right, because we've had to deal with so many people that have been sort of misinformed about what meditation is. And we've even had people come to us that say, my meditation teacher said I don't have what it takes to meditate. I think that is some bad karma, to keep people from being able to meet their own mind and meet their own heart and meet their own interior because you judge them in some way that they're incapable of it. I think that is a terrible thing, a disservice that a teacher could do. So I really, really believe that meditation teachers should be very well trained, and they should have their own practice, and they should have longevity in their practice, because it's probably one of the most important things you can do for yourself. And you want to be taught correctly.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So if you look a couple of years into your future, what are some of the possibilities that light you up?
Oh, I see the whole world as enlightened. I see the whole world waking up, or they have woken up. I see that people wake up to their relationship with our natural world in a way that we appreciate the air we breathe, the plants we eat, the space we get to move around in, the oceans and the waters, the light, the warmth. I just feel like, it may be utopia, but I see us all being in a beautiful community of people really respecting each other for their differences and their similarities. And I'm counting on that. I don't know what's going to orchestrate this wake up call. I think some of us are waking up right now. And maybe if you're listening to this, you're one of them. And I don't know what being fully awake looks like, but I do think it has to do with personal responsibility for staying out of the drama, for being strong, for staying in your integrity, to maintaining your values, maintaining your truth, and speaking up for what you believe. And I see that in our relationship to all of our brothers and sisters, kinship with all life, not just people we deem as just like us or believe like we do, but staying out of the speciesism, and loving every living being. I mean, that's my plan.
Yeah, I love that plan. I'm on board.
I don't know how it's going to happen, but sometimes it takes a quantum leap.
Yeah, I don't know how it's going to happen either, but I do know that it's going to happen. And that is, and part of knowing that it's going to happen is leveraging your own manifestation capabilities towards creating that world, right?
Yeah.
Just expecting it, just start there. And then,
Yeah.
because the fact is, the thing that I notice all the time is that, we have all of this stuff coming at us, that all of these problems in the world, let's say 10,000, but there's more like 10 million. Let's say this, we get, in our time-bound experience, we can focus on this much of it. What we actually give our time to, right? We can't fix it all. We have to really be selective. And the rest of it, what do we do with the rest of it? Okay, so I'm going to go out and I'm going to do activism on my sliver, my slice of stuff. What do you do with the rest of it? Well, my answer to that is expectation. Expect it to be better. Give your energy to solutions, right? Because
Yeah.
we can just kind of be aware of all those problems. We can't go out and, one person cannot go out and try to address them all. What do? Expect it to be better. Expect people to come along with open hearts and woke minds and come up with brilliant solutions that have never been thought of before. And we're going to get through this.
Yeah. The power of attention, right? Putting your attention on the positive, putting your attention on people living their full potential. And sometimes that's hard to do. So you really have to make an effort to do it. And I like your attitude, do your little thing, and the road to enlightenment is paved with great faith and great doubt. So if you have the doubts, don't beat yourself up for it. It is part of it all.
Yeah.
But then come back to your faith.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, faith in the good stuff.
There's such deep compassion in that observation. Thank you. Okay, Sarah McLean, you are a light in the world, shining very brightly. I'm so happy that you came on the show today. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.